We're going to be in Acts 9, starting in verse 32. The text was read earlier. The ladies did a great job going through that. Miracles are interesting as we talk about expecting the unexpected. Miracles. I mean, how many times have we prayed for something miraculous to happen and it just feels like the prayer goes nowhere, straight up into the sky, into nowhere? I brought this. I did it actually without my wife's permission, so I hope it's okay. This is our prayer jar, okay? Now she started it. My wife started this a number of years ago. And in it, what we do is every year, one time a year, we kind of fill this up. We put in prayer requests. So like literally just a bunch of prayer requests that are on our hearts. So we sit around the table, talk as a family. God, what are you doing in our hearts? Speak to us. And we all fill out these prayer requests and we put them in a jar. And then we spend all year praying over them. I've noticed something over the years of having a prayer jar. The first thing is this. Our prayer requests are not all the same, but we often all feel just as strong about whatever we're requesting. Okay, so here's the example. When my kids were even younger yet, we've been doing this for a number of years. So when my kids were even younger yet, and they would put like, oh, I just pray, Lord Jesus, by your grace, give me a Nintendo. Praise be to God, you know. And they put it in there, man. That's really the desire of their heart. Like they're passionate about wanting this Nintendo. And then you have other prayer requests that people put in there. You know, we have friends that are going through really difficult times in their marriage, and we want to pray for them. I had a friend, Brian, that I went to college with who had cancer. And so, you know, like people, we just pray. We're just praying for people. And I've noticed something over the years of having a prayer jar. Every year at the end of the year, we pull it back out, and we then look through the prayer requests that we made on the prayer jar. And it's kind of like a time to see what God has been up to and what he's been doing. And there are some really cool things that have happened because of the prayer jar. But there's a lot that hasn't. I mean, you can look at this and go, God is faithful, or you can look at it and go, God is absent. They're both in there. At least it feels that way. At least it feels that way. You know, when you pull it out at the end of the year and you begin to pray through stuff or think about it and it hits you, you know, my friend Brian, he died, but the kids got their Nintendo. We live in a world where, especially for us that have grown up in this modern Facebook technology, constantly bombarded by electronics, those of us that have grown up around it, the millennials, you would feel this for sure, and then the generation even after that, we are so bombarded every day by exaggerated marketing. I mean, it's almost comical. It's almost gotten to the point where it's nearly comical. I mean, it's like a beer commercial, right? It's, if you drink this beer, all these beautiful women are going to surround you. I mean, if it was like an actual thing, if you drink a whole lot of this beer, you're going to get diabetes and old and chubby and look like this guy. But they don't show that on the marketing, right? Like, it's not accurate. It's exaggerated, false. We know marketing is just, it's a level of fake. We just know that it's a level of fake. We know that if you buy this shampoo hair product, it's not going to make your hair grow back. And all the bald men said, amen. Amen. Right? It's not going to work. I mean, they show that it's going to work, but it doesn't. We know all this marketing. In fact, we're so conditioned to believe in that most of the marketing is false or exaggerated that we just kind of dismiss stuff now. And now we have a new term. See, this exaggerated part has gotten so exaggerated. And see, exaggerated is kind of a funny word because exaggerated is basically permission to be a little fake. It's permission to be a little fake. That's what exaggerated means. So the exaggerated commercials, I mean, it's not totally fake. I mean, this shampoo with the right person and the right genetic makeup, in very rare instances, it's possible that just maybe it might grow a hair right in the middle, straight up. I don't know, right? Like, it's possible. So it's not totally false. But now we have a new term for even news that's so exaggerated. As the exaggeration has grown and grown and grown, we have a new term. The new term that we call it is we call it fake news, false news. You've probably seen this all over Facebook. They're trying to create news organizations that are true news. Oh, yeah, because they'll be true and not biased by the writer. But we're so conditioned to see or grow up in a world with exaggerated marketing, and we're so conditioned to know that so much of the stuff that we see come our way is probably false or fake, that when we hear stories of God doing the miraculous, like when you look at this and when you do hear stories of God doing the miraculous things, we tend to go exaggerated or maybe even fake completely. We're conditioned to really think that way, to be very cynical. Let me give you a couple of miracles that I have heard. One of them is recent. One of them was as a kid, kind of the first miracle I heard. As a child, I grew up in South Dakota. I was born in Brookings, and then we used to do youth camps. Loved it. Youth camp was awesome. We used to do youth camp over in the Black Hills. And when I was there as a kid, there was a story that was often told about Jesus. I remember this as a little kid. It's one of the first stories I ever heard. Now, you got to remember, I heard this. I'm almost 40. I heard this when I was a little kid. And the person that told it about when they were younger. So this is years ago. I'm sure laws today would prevent this situation from even happening. So this is years old when this event took place. As the story goes, there's a blue-collar worker. He was working in a multi-story building. As he was working in the building, his child, one daughter, and her mother came up to visit him. They go up, they make their way up to the top. The building wasn't finished, and they had like a wood bar, and I'm remembering this to the best of my ability. They had like a wood bar on the outside of the building so the workers wouldn't fall out. Well, as the mom and dad were talking, as the story goes, the little girl is over playing by the edge of the building, and she reaches up for the wood and misses it. The little girl reaching for the wood handle on the side of the multi-story building and falls out multiple floors up. Mom and dad freaking out. They're running down the stairs. As they're running down the stairs, they're praying, God, by your grace, please save our little girl. God, please save our little girl. They run downstairs. They run outside, and they see their daughter playing in the grass. And the mom and dad walk up, emotional, as I remember the story as they were telling it, emotional, just in tears, going, what happened? What happened? And the little girl goes, a big man came up and caught me and set me down. And of course, there was no big man in sight. And then another one, this one's more recent. You may be seeing this one all over Facebook. This one is a pastor in Asia this last Easter. As the story goes, they were worshiping. They were getting ready to have their Easter services. And some Muslim extremists came out to attack this worship service. And as they came out and were coming in to actually attack them, a lion, did you see this on Facebook? Maybe some of you did. A lion supposedly jumps out of the woods and attacks the extremists. So brings them down. I don't know which group it was. It's irrelevant for this story, right? Takes them down. They take him down to the ground, and this lion's fighting with him, and then some of the other militants come, and they start fighting the lion. When they start fighting the lion, as the story goes, 2 more lions come out of the woods, and there's this big tussle between the extremists and the lions. And then when it's all said and done, some of them, were hurt really bad, and others were chased off into the woods, and the Christians were able to finish their Easter service. I am so conditioned to be cynical. I am so conditioned to be cynical. I am so conditioned to be cynical. Do you know where I went? Snoops.com. Right? Instead of being praise be to God, that should have been a good Christian, that should have been your response. Praise be to God right away. Right away, I'm Snoops.com or Snopes or however you say it. I don't even know how you say it. I go to the website to even see. Of course, they can't validate it being true or false on there, of course. But I'm learning over and over again that I am absolutely shaped by my culture to view miracles through a lens. For those of you that hear this, there are people here, as soon as you hear these miraculous stories, you're automatically in. Your heart is connected to it, and you go, wow, that's awesome. God is so faithful. And then there are other people here, maybe people here that are even a little bit like me, where you think it's probably chance. Who knows? Maybe those extremists were having a big barbecue the night before, and they were covered in barbecue sauce. And the lions were and they jumped out of the woods and ran them down. Maybe that's what happened. I don't know. right? Like maybe it's got to be chance. I mean, something in your mind. There's got to be a rational explanation. Now, you could back it up and say maybe even the barbecue dinner was of God. Who knows, right? But in your mind, you're probably like me, and you're just trying to work this through in your brain. And by nature, you think it's either chance, it's either exaggerated. Maybe it wasn't lions, maybe it was a mouse, and it scared them, and they ran out. Who knows? It's exaggerated. Or maybe even in your mind, you think it's totally untrue. Either way, you're choosing to put your faith in something that you believe, even if it's your own cynical attitude. So this begs a really good question, and I've actually talked about this with a number of different guys here in the church. What makes something a miracle? Like, what in the world makes something a miracle? And a couple of things come to mind. First question, thought is it when something really rare happens? Maybe that's a miracle. A miracle is when, see, Pastor Mike, I only believe in things that are really rare, like they can only happen maybe once. And they're not repeatable. Science can't repeat it. It's nothing that can happen. Like, it's super, super rare, and it has to have absolutely happened, 100% proven to be true without a shadow of a doubt. See, I would believe in miracles if it was truly rare, not repeatable, and everybody knew that it absolutely happened. So we were kind of wrestling this through with a couple other guys in the church, and we thought, are there any things that fit this criteria that people would still say, I don't believe in miracles, but I think this is true? And we thought of one really easy one. Actually, there's a lot of them, but one really easy one, the Big Bang. Redshift, light, one little itty-bitty ball of power of some kind, and then in an instant, boom, cosmological constants create the conditions in which these things can go forward right, create denser matter, create ultimately sun, you have hydrogen burning, and then more complicated things in the periodic table can be created because of the heat of the sun. I mean, this really rare event, we can't reproduce it. We do believe, I read a scientific thing the other day. I was reading a research paper, and they were saying that they think there maybe have been other Big Bangs and other multiverses, and then later on the article it says, but there's no way to know this or prove it. There's no way to know this or prove it. So it happened once. It's incredibly powerful. We can't repeat it, and everybody believes it happens. And there are still people that would see something like this and go, there's no miracles. There's still no miracles. Still, that's not miraculous. All right, so that's fine. Let's go to the next one. What makes something a miracle? Maybe it is when something happens that appears to be contrary to what we understand about nature. So maybe miraculous things are just things that are contrary to what happens in nature. So like the natural order of things, something that goes against that natural process, as we understand it, maybe that's miraculous. Then what pops into my mind is like the Middle Ages with the compass. Remember when the compasses, I don't know if you remember your history all that well, when compasses first became known and used, they thought they were witchcraft. There was like a spell on them because of the magnetic, right? We even know now with quantum sciences, all of this progression, we even know now that there is a lot that we do not understand at all. I was reading another article where they're even putting into question the parts of the scientific method because the quantum sciences are so incredibly different. And even Einstein himself, with quantum entanglement, uses the word spooky as he describes it. So we know without a doubt that there is things that are way more advanced than us, and our understanding is limited, and we know that there are things out there that are happening that are way beyond our ability to comprehend or understand. So what exactly is it that makes something miraculous? I came across this quote, actually this is years ago, by C.S. Lewis. Those of you that attend here on a regular basis know that I am a big C.S. Lewis fan. I love that old Oxford scholar. C.S. Lewis says this. Now, take all of what we just thought through. For this reason, the question whether miracles occur, all of what we talked about, now, he says it in a lot longer way. If you want to get the book Miracles, you can read it. For this reason, the question whether miracles occur can never be answered simply by experience. It can't. Because people are going to look at the exact same thing and believe all conditions to be true, and one will say, I believe in miracles, and the next person will go, no. For every event, C.S. Lewis, brilliant Oxford scholar, every event which might claim to be a miracle is, in the last resort, something presented to our senses. There it is. You can experience it. Something seen, heard, touched, smelled, or tasted. And our senses are not infallible. You could be tricked. The magnetic thing is just something we don't understand. If we just understand it more. If anything extraordinary seems to have happened, we can always say that we have been the victim of an illusion. Lewis goes on to say this, and I think this is really, really important as you continue it. So in this thought, he says, if we hold, and this is the really important part of this, right? If we hold a philosophy, if you hold a philosophy which excludes the supernatural, this is what we will always, or this is what we always shall say. What we learn from experience depends on the kind of philosophy we bring to experience. It is therefore useless to appeal to experience before we have settled, as best we can, the philosophical question: do you actually believe them to be possible? If you do not believe them to be possible, you will always find a reason to doubt, even if it is extremely rare, cannot be repeated, even if it is way beyond what we understand, something way more complicated. If you philosophically do not believe that they can exist, you will choose that not based on evidence, but based on the philosophical presupposition that you bring to the table. That's just how it works. I go through this, and I'm cynical by nature. I go through this, and I go, God, where were you at when Brian died? My wife goes through it and says, God, you are so faithful. We're looking at the exact same criteria. God, where were you at when Brian died? My wife says, God, why are you so faithful? Isn't it amazing how opposites attract? It's good. I am going to get into heaven literally with my wife like dragging me along. Come on, get in here. With this in mind, I want to look at a couple of different miracles that happened in the text, and we read them earlier. Acts 9:32 through 43. All right, now picture this in your brain to the best of your ability, okay? So the gospel is being marched forward toward the coast is what's happening here. So the gospel of Jesus Christ is going into a new community being proclaimed. New community being proclaimed. New community being proclaimed. And then they're even coming back up and going, in this newer community of faith, we're establishing deeper, systems and processes, and the church is being put together. It's kind of the epicenter of the church in a lot of these communities. So it's growing and growing and growing. So this is following, literally, these two miracles are following the progression of the gospel towards the coast as gospel grows further and further out. Now as Peter went here and there among them all. Okay, well that's good. He's out doing his Peter thing. I'm down with that. He came down also to the saints who lived in Lydia. And there he found a man named Aeneas, bedridden for 8 years, who was paralyzed. And Peter said to him, Aeneas, Jesus Christ heals you. Rise and make your bed. It's kind of cool. I mean, who wouldn't like to have one of the pastors or even Jesus himself show up on the planet, walk into a children's hospital, and go up, 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 up? Then we'd all believe, right? There'd be no doubt. Everybody would be in. And immediately he rose, and all the residents of Lydia, Sharon, saw him. They turned to the Lord. Now there was in Joppa a disciple named Tabitha, which translated means Dorcas, and all the junior hires laughed. It's a rough name. There's still a little junior hire in me. It is a rough name, Dorcas. Okay. Listen, Dorcas, I don't know if you hear any of what's going on here. I really do respect you. She was full of good works and acts of charity, right? So she's a really good person. Rough name, good person. In those days she became ill and died, and when they had washed her, they laid her in an upper room. Since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples, hearing that Peter was there, sent 2 men to him, urging him, please come to us without delay. So Peter rose and went to them. And when he arrived, they took him to the upper room. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other garments that Dorcas had made while she was with them. But Peter put them all outside and knelt down and prayed. And turning to the body, he said, Tabitha, arise. And she opened her eyes. And when she saw Peter, she sat up. And he gave her his hand and raised her up. Then calling the saints and widows, he presented her alive. And it became known throughout all Joppa that many believed in the Lord. And he stayed in Joppa for many days with one Simon the tanner. A couple things from this that are important. As we see the gospel progress, so we have Peter taking the gospel of Jesus Christ into a new community. Miracles are happening, great things are taking place, and new believers. Into a community, great things are taking place, new believers, miracles are happening, all this miraculous stuff is taking place. We're seeing this progression. In the text, miracles validate the gospel. As with many vanguards or front lines of ministry, we often find they accompany many rumors of the miraculous. And the crazy thing is, this is even true today. So where do you hear about most of the miracles happening? Most of the miracles are happening, even today when you hear about this, you hear about them happening in the place where it's being taken to. New area, massive miracles, crazy. That's where all the rumors of miracles, most of the rumors of miracles are happening. Even today when you hear about them, when you read about them on the news, when missionaries come back and share about it from the pulpit, they get up and they talk about all the cool things that they've seen, and God is moving in extraordinary ways, and whatever happened, such and such was healed, and you can't believe what God is doing. And they almost always, just like in the Bible, when you read these miraculous things, they almost always are in tandem with the progress of the gospel. Progress of the gospel, all this is taking place. Progress of the gospel, all this is taking place. This is even true in here. The next thing that we find is this. They show the nature of Christ. They show the nature of Christ. He loves to demonstrate compassion, especially to the humble. Throughout the Bible, we see over and over and over again that God often allows miraculous things or even listens deeply, often, not always, there are exceptions, but often listens to people who have massively humble, great hearts. Like he loves to take care of his children who love him. The next thing that we see is this. So we see the nature of Christ. The next thing is they work to show that God is involved. He absolutely is involved. This isn't just a work of man, and God is not distant. The fact that these events that take place that are so beyond our modern understanding of technology, our modern understanding of how the world works, shows that something much greater than us is intervening to help us out. He is not distant. He is in with us. And he hears the cries of his people. The last thing is this. They show that God hears the cries of his people. He absolutely listens and cares. So when we go before God and we lift this up to him, it's not that he hears my wife and he doesn't hear me. Because there's prayer requests in here of hers that haven't been answered for years. It's important for us to remember that many miracles are for even a greater purpose than temporary pleasure of the one who receives them. Guys, I've been in ministry now long enough, not just my degrees or education, not just studying undergraduate, not just graduate school, not just all the other, not all of that. It's not all of that. There's something so much bigger at play here. And I cannot tell you how many times I have heard the very things that people are trying to pray away are the things that God ends up using to do something so incredibly significant. A parent gets really sick with cancer and dies in a terrible way, and the family's like, where is God, where is God, where is God? And years later, right, a child who is now an adult comes into my office and says, I just cannot reconcile this. I've struggled for years wrestling through this, and now I'm trying to find and help me work through this. How do I put this all together? It is crazy how little I understand about the trajectory of God's precision. However, many miracles are for even greater purposes than temporary pleasure of the one who receives them. This is John Calvin. I love this quote. It's challenging, but I love it. Calvin says, to what end was it, say they, to call back the soul of Tabitha into the prison of the prison of the body, where it should suffer such misery if it were received into blessed rest. The truth is, Every time we pray that somebody is healed, we're praying them away from the greatest joys that they're putting off yet again. But God does call people back, and He does heal. Is it just so that Junior can get bounced on the knee of Daddy a few more times? Maybe. But it might be that God is up to stuff that we don't understand, and He is actually delaying their greatest joys for a purpose that we may not understand. And so I'm learning with every prayer request that goes in here is a cry from my heart and a choice to trust God. It is a cry from my heart as I write it down and a choice to trust God. Every prayer request is a cry of my heart and a choice to trust God. Every one. I'm going to invite Josh up and we're going to be done in just a moment. This begs the question, why don't you receive the miracle you are praying for? Why don't I receive some of the miracles I've been praying for? There is one in here. I don't want to share it. There's one in here I've been praying for years and years and years and years. Every once in a while, I'll take it out and fill out a new little piece of paper just to keep it fresh. But I feel like it just sits at the bottom with all these other things coming and going, life moving forward. There's one little thing in here that just sits at the bottom, waiting. Waiting. Year after year. I think a couple of things are happening when we don't have our prayer requests met, and I don't know where this one falls. I don't see it, I don't get it. I got a lot of education, a lot of time at the helm, and I've grown up in professors' homes on seminary university campuses, and there's stuff in there, I don't have a clue where my heart is really at on it, and I'm not sure what to do with it. So I bet you're in the same boat too with some things. Couple reasons why your miracles may not be answered the way you wanted. It may just not be God's timing yet. He may be up to something that we don't understand, but here are some others that you ought to consider. The first one is this. You may be praying against an actual work of God that you don't understand. You may be praying against it. Like you're praying for God to do a work, which actually He's doing another work that requires this to happen, but you don't see it or get it. With every prayer request must go trust. And again, how many times I sit in my office and have people fully broken before the Lord over something horrible that happened years ago, and that becomes the vehicle in which they do amazing things for the kingdom, or the way in which they're woken up, or the way, I don't get it, God is so much bigger than me. The only option you have, if this is you, is trust. That's it. Because you don't get it and you don't see it, you're not God. Trust. The next thing that could be happening is this. You're praying that God delivers you. You're praying that God delivers you from your own stupidity. All right? You want no repercussions. Let me give you the example. A couple years ago, years ago, early on in ministry, I started in the fall of 1999 as a youth pastor, and early on in the early years of doing youth ministry, I was working with a student who just battled with drug addiction all the way through. I mean, smoked weed a ton, would party with his friends, would feel really guilty about it. You know, he'd use other prescription medications, he'd sample other stuff too, and just always into drugs, off of drugs, into drugs, off of drugs. I ended up working there as the youth pastor for a number of years, moved on with life. Just a few years ago, I got a phone call from him. He's an adult now, or he would be like just out of college, that somewhere in that pocket age-wise probably. He'd be older than that. And he calls me on the phone, and he's like, Pastor, he was emotional. He's like, Pastor Mike, I got your number. I just had to talk to you. Can you pray that God would do a miracle in my life? Well, I'm knowing his history. I'm like, yeah, well, let's do it. Lord, by your grace, I just pray that you would rescue him from this terrible stuff that has just encompassed his life and work in his heart. So I'm praying for him. And then we finish. I'm like, so what's going on? What's happening? And he says this. He's like, I'm in jail, and you're my phone call. Well, it had to have been multiple phone calls because he had to get my number, but it ended up at me. So I said, what happened? And then he says this. He says, well, I was out partying again a couple of weeks ago, and I was doing drugs, and then I started taking some other drugs, and some people brought some stuff. I don't even know what it was. It was prescription medication, so I was taking that, and then I was drinking a bunch, and honestly, I don't even remember about 24 to hours. Like there's like a day and a half, 2 days that are just gone out of my memory. I don't remember it. And I was like, well, what happened? And he says, I guess I broke into my ex-girlfriend's house, trashed the place, and beat her up really bad. And I just prayed that he'd be rescued. From his situation. And so this is what I told him on the phone. I said, you know what? Maybe this is God's rescue. And maybe instead of praying that you get out of jail, I pray that the Lord keeps you there. That you might find sobriety, that you may not hurt others in your sin. Maybe this is the answer of God. The next thing is this, and this is really, really important. If you miss all the rest of the morning, don't miss this. And I need you to think this through with me, okay? The situation is different today than before. Now, I don't mean miracles did happen and now they don't. That's not what I'm saying. Miracles did happen and they still do. What I'm saying is, for most people in this room, for most of you sitting in this room, the situation in your life is so very different than the situation of the believers that are seeing miracles, okay? Here's why. Most of us don't live on the front lines of ministry. In the Bible, where the Gospels move forward, miraculous things are happening. I mean, this is even happening in the text we just read. Gospel moving forward, miracles are happening. Even now around the world, where do we see the greatest miracles? Wherever the Gospel is being taken into a place, new place, miracles are happening. Here's the truth. Most of us don't live on the front lines of ministry. Okay, this is going to sting. You're going to get mad at me. All right? You're going to get mad at me. I'm okay with that. We live in fear and scarcity, hiding our lives away with only other believers, hunkering down, waiting for Christ's return or death. That's how most Christians live. They live hunkering down, waiting for Christ's return or death. If you want to live where the miracles are, it appears you should go where they are happening, on the front lines of ministry. Most Christians in our modern world in America today, you live in total fear and scarcity. I mean, the primary command of the gospel to go into the world and make disciples, baptize them in the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. I bet if I was to sit down with each one of you personally, less than half of you, maybe only a small fraction of you, would even know the name of the last person you led to the Lord or shared your faith with. You're not living the gospel, and you're wanting all the benefits of living it. You're actually living disobedient lives. But boy, you want God to bless you with your toys, and you want God to bless you with more money, and you want God to bless you with more influence, and you want all the good stuff and none of the obedience, or very little of it. Let me tell you what is happening on the front lines of ministry. Now again, depending on the philosophy you bring to the table, you're either going to try to dismiss it with a cynical attitude, or you can choose to embrace it. But it's going to depend not on the evidence, it's going to depend on the philosophy you bring to the table. That old Oxford scholar is 100% right. It is mostly determined by this little tiny, finite, bitty brain of yours. And the attitude that you have. one of my good friends from high school, I met him in youth group. He was saved in high school. Chris is his name. He became a missionary, and he is taking the gospel even now. He has for years. I mean, he's been in the ministry almost 20 years too. He's a little older than I am. So he's taking the gospel, and he is doing it continually into closed countries where it's illegal to be a Christian. Here a couple of years ago, he was sharing, we had met together, got some pizza together, and we were hanging out, telling me about ministry, what's going on. He was sharing about his life, and he shared this with me. He goes, Mike, man, it is unbelievable. I love it. Now, he has suffered for his faith, but he also has miracles, legit miracles. He said, not too long ago, before we sat down, okay, this is not hearsay, this is not news. This is one of my good friends who I absolutely trust. He's always been faithful. There's no reason for him to lie. He was going into a closed country, and they were desperately needing Bibles. They had been destroyed or taken by the authorities. And so he went out, back home, got a whole bunch of Bibles, and went back in through customs, was coming up into the country, two literally big, like, army duffel bags full of Bibles in their native language, right? On his shoulder, walks into customs, and then he gets pulled aside, come with us. So he goes over to the side, and he knows, back in jail, whatever, who knows what's going to happen if they find these in there, and he lays them out on the table, and he's emotional. He says, I remember staying there and going, God, for the sake of these people, do something miraculous. And he said the guards opened it up, started sifting through the Bibles, even pulling them out and thumbing through them. They put the Bibles back in the bag, and they're like, it's all good, go ahead and go. And he shared with me, he's like, man, God is on the move, and he's doing such amazing things. Here's the deal. It's because he is on the front lines. He's taking the gospel, marching it with faithfulness, obeying the work of God to the best of his ability, marching it faithfully, trying to take it forward, whatever it takes. And through the Bible, and even in our own modern world, where we are faithfully marching the gospel forward, is where some of the greatest, amazing spiritual activity is at. Do you know that I pray for some people to be rich and others to lose it? Yesterday, it's a true story. Another friend from high school who has become very wealthy through multiple small businesses gets a hold of me yesterday. He sends me a text, and then we ended up talking just briefly, but he sends me a text and he says, Mike, God's working in my heart, and I feel like God wants me to give 10%, not of my income. He's already given way more than 10%. He goes, I feel like God's calling me to give 10% of the total revenue of his businesses, plural, to the work of Christ. And I've got to figure out a way to make that happen. Pray that God would provide. I'm praying that God blesses him like crazy, so that we can send more missionaries overseas, send more people out through the gospel. I'm praying that for him. There are other people that can't give because they have so much. See, you're praying for your toys, and you're praying for a few more years on this planet that you can sit on a beach or play golf. I reject that in the name of Jesus. That's not the work of the gospel. That stings. God, by your grace, fill my church with people that are ready to obey you. God, by your grace, fill my heart with a passion that roars for obedience. And then by your grace, provide the means that we might see thousands become tens of thousands, become millions through a work of your word. Don't waste space. Be faithful. Be faithful. Be faithful. Be faithful. Please be faithful. And watch God work. With every request that I put in this jar, I have to marry it with trust. And I bet some of you have been praying for things, and really what you need to be praying for is forgiveness. Forgiveness. I'm way out of time. I got to end this. Here's the last thing. I believe that God is on the move, not through secondhand stories, but firsthand stories from friends of mine. I believe God is on the move. I'm seeing amazing things take place. I believe God is on the move, and he wants to do, he doesn't just want, he is doing amazing things around the world. He loves his children. He loves his children. He loves us. See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God, and so we are. The reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. We are the means. He loves us as children, and we are vehicles to make this happen. Be faithful. Here's what I want you to do. Everybody grab the response card in the back of the chairs in front of you. Again, if you go to church here, Lord forgive you. We don't just want to hear good stories. We don't just want to learn some original language stuff. We don't want to, play around a little bit in Greek and play around a little bit in Hebrew, maybe learn a little Aramaic in there, sifting in there too. The original language stuff I like all that. It's fun to do. I get it. I spend a lot of time in classrooms. That's fun. But at the end of the day, the gospel should change you. It should change you. It should change you. And so I'm going to ask just a couple of questions this morning. Are you ready? Maybe you're in group one. There's two groups that I'm thinking of. Maybe you're in group one. And group one is, I've been in the church a long time, and I know in my heart I've been disobedient to the work of Christ. Maybe it's as simple as this. I was talking with a guy not too long ago, and I was like, hey man, you need to pray with your kids. And he goes, oh, I'm not comfortable praying with my kids. And of course, my personality, I'm like, don't care, love you. Let's get you comfortable with it. Maybe for you, the first step of faith you need to make is being responsible, faithful representative of Christ in your own home. And you go, but I don't know, I'm nervous about praying. I'm nervous about sharing my faith. Well, step out in faith and watch a miracle happen, man. Be the dad that God's called you to be and watch a miracle happen. Take your kids out. I don't know how to disciple them. Go try. Sit down with your child, get to know them as they share their art, and you go back and forth. Watch a miracle happen. Step out in faith. Maybe it's even in your own home where you're willing to step out in faith and be the gospel. Finally be faithful. That first group, maybe you're in this first group, and the first group, you came in here wanting to figure out how to get your prayer requests answered for more money and a better job. And what actually has to happen is you need to say, God, I'm sorry for being disobedient. Forgive me. That's group one. If that's you, on your card, I just want you to write, Father, forgive me. Help me to live faithful. Group two, here's second group. The second group is all the people out there that are battling with cancer, the people out there that have difficult sicknesses, the people out there that have loved ones that you really wish would be healed. The people out there that, you feel so worn out, so broken. There's just nothing left in you, and all you have is Abba, Father, Daddy, I am worn out, I am tired, I got nothing. Please, if that's you, if you're in that second group and you're literally praying for a miracle, whatever it might be, I want you to know you can go before the Lord and make your request to the Father. He is good and He loves you. But every time you fill that out, it's not just saying, I want. You fill out your prayer request with, I trust, not I want. I trust is the foundation. I want comes next. I trust you. I would love to be in a different job. I'm not satisfied where I'm at. But God, I lay this before you as a sacrifice, and I trust you. See, this jar is changing from a vase that holds my wants to a vase that represents the things that I choose to trust God with. That's what it's becoming. It's not just a bowl full of my wants. It is a bowl full of the things that I have to give to God and trust Him with. God, I give these to you even now. I've watched loved ones die. The marriages fall apart. And I would love to see miracles happen. But God, I trust you. That's this jar. If that's you, on your prayer card, you just maybe need to write, God, with my aunt that has cancer, I trust you. God, with the job that I hate, I trust you. Group 1, forgive me. Group 2, I trust you. And a lot of you will probably have both. Take a moment before the Lord, reflect, write, go. We just want to thank you for watching the sermon online. If God is working in your heart, we would love to hear about it. You can go online, www.encountertrinity.com/nextstepscard. You can fill out information there. Let us know what God is doing in your heart. If you need help with anything, we would love to help. Counseling, we would love to do anything that we can to help you go to that next level spiritually. When you fill this out, it goes to one of our pastors. It is private, and we will take care of that information to the best of our ability. We love you, we care about you, and we want to see God do great things in your life. Have a great day.